there's a lot of really amazing and just not organic, grassroots driven activity. And you all are at the forefront of much of that. And so our theory of the case on, let me just give you like the simple version. I kind of always open with this, but we believe our political system is broken. We believe that the way out of that brokenness is to shift the incentive structure for politicians in particular, but also candidates to act differently. Our whole theory of the case is our political system actually is not broken. It's actually working as designed. If you want it to act differently, you have to create different incentive structures for that. How do you create different incentive structures? It begins with election reform. There can be other things that change incentives for candidates as well. But we really think election reform is an outsized intervention that not only can be effective, but it can also be implemented. So it's not pie in the sky stuff. It's not, there's a lot of aspirational ideas around, doubling the size of Congress or direct votes or getting rid of the Electoral College or, citizen-led spending initiatives and things like that. Those things might be interesting, or term limits or campaign finance reform. We think those things are interesting maybe, but also incredibly hard to achieve. What is achievable is taking the opportunity in 50 states across the country, as well as communities across the country, to change the way our elected officials are elected. And we have evidence from Alaska that if you change the election systems, you immediately, there's no lag time in this, you immediately change the behavior of the people running for office, because the path to victory is fundamentally different. And if we want to restore majority rule in this country and allow independents to participate, you have to change the election systems. And so that's why we're so convicted by this mission, because it's not only powerful, but it's also achievable. And there are, I think 24 campaigns that we're tracking around the country to basically citizens like yourselves, like us, stepping forward and saying enough is enough. Let's get to solutions. There's a way to do that. And the path is through election reform. We can get into, there's honest and differing theories of the case about whether you focus on final five voting or open primaries or ranked choice voting, or do you go for, big solutions all at once? Do you take incremental approaches? We can have all those conversations. We have points of view, but we're also not, we don't want ideology to get in the way of progress and practicality. So our view is like, hey, if there's movement on the ground, things look possible, we want to support it. And just stay focused on the big mission, which is election reform, and not get caught up in kind of intra-movement squabbles around preferred methods and things like that. I mean, I understand some of that exists, it's honest, but we want to stay focused on true north, because the clock is ticking. We don't have a ton of time, I believe, to get this work done. So enough of my soapbox. I think we all know that that's why we're here, but I always like to just reaffirm that that's what we're trying to do as an organization. Top line, we're proud to have, Eric, you can correct me on this, but volunteers in 45 states across the country. We've got a path to getting hopefully our final 5 states represented. We'll share what those states are in case folks in Rhode Island or West Virginia or North Dakota or Iowa, or I'm missing one, Rhode Island. Did I say Rhode Island? There's 5 states that are still outstanding. We'll share those states with you. But one person in a state is hugely powerful. I mean, this work is done not with hundreds of thousands of volunteers. It's done with a core committed 3 to 5 people in every state, like yourselves, who just take on the mantle of leadership and work to kind of condition set within your state. So we are a huge believer in small numbers creating big impact, a small and mighty committed few having an outsized impact in this work. So help us round out the map to get to all 50 states. We've got specific focuses in which we can talk about: Alaska, Nevada, Wisconsin, Nebraska, Missouri, but really, I think huge opportunities in Idaho, Washington, D.C., the activity in Virginia, the activity in Wyoming, the fight for open primaries in Pennsylvania. So there's a lot of opportunities across the country. We'll get into it all because you're all driving that. So huge gratitude for spending an hour with us, and then doing everything that you're doing outside this call. If you have done nothing, don't worry about it. You're still here. You're welcome. My experience has been like, you build the bench, the ready room, and all of a sudden like a flare pops up and we're off and running in a place where we didn't necessarily expect it. So even if it's just being here and saying, I'm here when needed, is hugely valuable. And I know a lot of you are doing a lot more than that, but just know that if that's your current state, like you're just here in listen mode, that's totally fine. And it's valuable actually for us and what we're doing. So with all of that, Eric Runner, I'm going to kick it over to you. I know you're hot off of a Washington, D.C. Board of Elections call. So love to kick it to you to introduce some of our new members, give an update from your perspective. And then what we really want to do is highlight some of our local leaders who are driving this work so you can get a sense of what they're experiencing and the hurdles as well as the opportunity from where they sit. So Eric, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Todd. And I see at least one of our outstanding board members, our brother Jake Harriman here. So Jake, thank you for joining us. Also, he also leads More Perfect Union, which is doing amazing work across the country. And Todd, just piggybacking off what you had to say, it's so exciting that every month we're onboarding new volunteers in states across the country. As Todd said, 45 states. We have about 260 committed leaders. And the beautiful thing about building this mission together, a lot of times someone will reach out and they'll apologize and say, I'm sorry, I haven't done anything for VPI. And then the next day, that same person introduces someone else to VPI in a different state. And that's exactly why having people on our roster, on the team, is so important. So whether you're able to contribute a lot or just a little bit, we're incredibly grateful for each and every one of you. I thought, so there's a couple of things we have on the agenda we want to do. We want to get an update from the good work that Todd Achilles and the team in Idaho is doing. And then hopefully our DC leader, Lisa Rice, can join us in a little bit. But first, why don't we go around? And I see a lot of folks who I've onboarded in the last month or two, and it's great to see you all here. So if this is your first call or if you're new to the team, I'll call on some of you, but if I don't call on you, please introduce yourself, where you served, where you live, and why you joined us. And I think I saw Treat in Arkansas, and I'm gonna, Treat, if you're with us still. Sorry, I'm having a 48-year-old moment here. Yeah, so Treat, if you'll unmute yourself. And he has a pretty incredible story of a big event he was a part of when he served in the Navy back in the day. So Treat, would you tell us about that?
Be glad to. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. Served in the U.S. Navy 68 to 72. And though most of my time was ashore, I did go TAD for the Apollo 13 recovery mission. And we lived in fear for a few weeks, and the astronauts pulled it off in spite of everything. It was exciting to be there. Even a 19-year-old joker could understand the momentum.
That's awesome. And Treat's in Arkansas, and yeah, what an amazing 19 years old to be on board when the crew was recovered from the Apollo 13. So that's one of the joys for me, getting to hear stories of fellow veterans who were part of big events. Going to Rich in Stevenson in Kentucky. We just talked for the first time, I think, 2 days ago. So Rich, would you introduce yourself?
Rich Stevenson, Special Agent, Army Intelligence, served in Korea, Republic of Korea, and served in Columbus, Ohio. Was just in for 3 years or whatever. Anyway, I'm a veteran. And Kentucky's a small state with 4 million voters, something like that. And I've got a plan for turning the state purple and getting it so it's back in the hands of the people. Anyway, I can go into that more or whatever, but I'm working on it. I can show you a couple of pages if we get a chance on today. It might show you what I'm doing. Thank
Great.
you.
Well, yeah, thank you so much for joining us, Rich. And Kentucky is one of only 9 states with closed primary elections where independent voters don't get to vote unless they join a private political party. Nothing gets my blood boiling more than the fact that political organizations tell independents you have to join us if you want to participate in your fundamental right. And so staying on Kentucky, Daniel Collins,
Yeah.
formerly from Nashville and now in Bowling Green, Kentucky. Would you introduce
Oh,
yourself,
yeah.
brother?
Okay.
Hello. Like I said, I'm Daniel. I had served in the Kentucky Army National Guard for 8 years as an artilleryman, and then I was a truck driver. Subsequently, I worked at an investment bank. I did that for 4.5 years, and wore several hats between now and then. So I'm glad to be here and excited to learn more, and really just hope to see what we can do to make a change, a positive change. Thanks. Awesome.
Thanks, Daniel. And let's go to one of our newer volunteers in Idaho, Scott. And Scott, I don't know exactly how to pronounce your last name, sorry, but 32 years in the Army Reserve and a former Idaho State Legislature joining us. Scott, would you introduce yourself?
Well, you kind of did it. I'm kind of a jump. So I was enlisted, then officer, and so I've done lots of different things. But anyway, I'm so excited for this. We definitely have a closed primary system and they're trying to exclude people every time they meet.
Great. Well, thanks for joining us, Scott. And we're excited to hear more about the great work that you all are doing in Idaho. It's very exciting for all of us. I see, let's see, Chris Kasker in New York, who is running on 2 party lines for a local office, both the Democrats and the Republicans. Chris, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Eric. Hi, everybody. Yep, Chris Kasker. I'm outside of New York City in a town called Tuxedo, New York. I'm actually on a village board, which is the lowest level of government in New York State. And in the fall, I'll be running for town board, which is the next level up. A couple of things going on around me. One, as Eric mentioned, I'm an actual Republican, and the Democrats recruited me to run with them, and that's based on my track record on the planning board for the town and the village board, and they just want somebody to get things done. And I thought, cool, I'm a shoo-in, and the Republicans gave me a really hard time to get on the ballot. So it just kind of got me fired up. And then on a side note, our village just had an election in June, and we still don't have a winner, because the mayors are going at it and there's lawsuits all over the place, and it's pretty crazy. So there are definitely some issues with the election system in our country, and specifically in New York here. And I'm happy to try to get involved and help to get us to what we fought for in many other different countries, and that's the simple right to vote.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks so much for joining us, Chris. Lots of good things happening in New York City and in New York State. We're partnered with Unite New York, which is working on many of the same reforms. And I see some of the leaders of Unite New York here, John Bullis and others. Let's see. I see Pete Snyder in Virginia, who recently joined us. And one of the things I love is just the servant-hearted spirit of all of our leaders. True servant leaders, from Jim Jones in Idaho, who was a former, attorney general and Supreme Court justice, who joined our organization the same way everyone else did, by filling out a volunteer form online. And I had to look up who's Jim Jones. Just the humility of that action, right? And then so Pete going to Pete Snyder, he's done a lot of amazing things, served in the Navy, served in business, and now he's serving as an 8th grade civics teacher in Virginia, and joined us recently. So Pete, if you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Eric. Actually, tomorrow's the first day of school, so I've been getting ready for the new year. But yeah, I was a surface warfare officer, did 8 years on active duty. I got out in 1998. 22 years in the corporate world selling telecommunications services to the federal government. And yeah, a few years ago, I got my credentials. So I'm really glad to be on the team.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much for joining us, Pete. And here's the risk of me calling on folks. I know there's people I'm going to leave out. So would you take the initiative if you're new or this is your first call or the first time you're joining us? Would you please? Scott in Virginia, local election official. One of his claim to fame is he says he taught Josh Daniels in Utah everything he knows about running local elections. I don't think Josh is here to rebut that, but Scott, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. It's an honor to be here with all of you. I served in the Army from 1979 to 1973 in Europe, the US, and of course, the Middle East. For the last 30 years, I've been an election administrator in some capacity or another, generally, or usually that's been as the principal election official in a county. I've worked in 4 states, California, Utah, Washington State, and Virginia. I'm currently a member of the Ranked Choice Voting Resource Center, so I'm very familiar with a fair vote and a lot of the reforms that have been going on with the adoption of ranked choice voting. I like you. I spent blood, sweat, tears, and fear defending our rights as Americans to participate in our democracy, and it troubles me to see that that foundation appears to be eroding. And I'm committed to do what I can do to strengthening our democratic institutions.
Thank you. Thanks so much for joining us, Scott. George Moses joining us for the first time from Idaho. George, would you introduce yourself, please?
Sure. George Moses, Air Force 67 to 72. I was in Vietnam 69 to 71. I'm part of the effort here in Idaho, which could be fairly described as Todd Achilles and the 7 Dwarfs, but I'm one of the dwarfs. I have a cousin who was in the Navy right about the time I was, and he was railing about people in office. And I said, look, Sam, if you use the same system, all you're going to get is the same people with different faces and names. Until you change the system, it's going to operate the way it operates. This is the most substantial effort I can remember seeing, and I've been in political campaigns from school board to president to make serious, substantial gains, and I'm really proud to be part of it.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much, George. Yeah, and great work in Idaho. We're excited to hear more here in a minute. Anyone else that's a first timer that I haven't called on?
I think York. There we go.
Yeah, I'm here. I don't know how well y'all can hear me. My audio output. Okay,
Lima
good.
Charlie.
I just retired from the Air Force. I'm in Fort Worth, Texas. I also spent a lot of time in Georgia. That's where I'm from. Robert Banks introduced me to the group. He's on the call. And yeah, I'm not big into politics or really know much about how these things work, but I do know that like everyone should have a vote and understand their vote. And we got to change something because it's ridiculous.
That's great.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks
Welcome.
for joining us, York.
Eric, this is John Bullis. You mentioned me before, but I've never really introduced myself. I've been in this group for a while, but I've always had to leave before I got the chance to introduce myself. John Bullis, New York State. I'm the current state chair of Unite New York. Spent 4 years in the Navy, 67 to 71 on the USS Independence. I was the Fly 1 PO, launched all the birds, and picked them up when they arrested. Been involved in upstate New York for a while, but New York statewide for the last 3 years, trying to get the rest of the upstate New York and New York City public aware of the need for reform. We are probably one of the most backward states in terms of governmental reform in the nation. And it's a heavy lift. So we really appreciate all the guys from New York that are coming on board. Chip, welcome aboard, and look forward to working with you in the future. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, John. All right. Oh, and Jonathan, Jonathan LeCamp in Kansas City, Missouri, the other side of the state from me. Go ahead, brother.
Yeah, I'll keep it brief. My name's Jonathan LeCamp. So I've been an Army reservist, I guess, for about 17 years now, primarily in aviation with Chinooks and C-12 airplanes. And so currently in law school at UMKC. And honestly, I think I might be preaching to the choir here, but kind of just fed up with the way things are operating. Missouri was typically a bellwether state historically, but now it's solidly red and made red because of some basically structural changes that make it impossible to have competitive elections, and a lot of efforts to undermine the ability to do citizen petitions and also the ability to even redistrict fairly at all, even to pretend to redistrict things fairly at all. And so that ability to have an actual representative government is, I think, similarly to everywhere else in the country, it's really under threat. And so if a party doesn't bless off on what you want to do, you don't even get a seat at the table. It's structurally impossible. I think that I can go on, but I think that's one of those things where it needs to be changed. And I think I look forward to participating with the group to do that.
Yeah. Thanks, Jonathan. I look forward to hopefully meeting you in person in Kansas City this fall.
Yeah.
And yeah, hello to Lisa Rice just joining us from DC. Lisa, we'll go to you. We're going to go to Idaho next. And just real quick, while we're on Missouri, most of you know there was a proposed ballot amendment to bring the Alaska election model, Final Four voting, to Missouri in 2022. And in spite of paying a third-party signature vendor $2 million, they failed to gather enough signatures to get top 4 open primaries and instant runoff voting on the ballot. It was heartbreaking for me. Even more heartbreaking, that same third-party signature vendor failed to get enough signatures to legalize marijuana in Missouri. But our Secretary of State, Jay Ashcroft, made a few phone calls and got that ballot initiative pushed through. So people are free to smoke up in Missouri now, but if you're an independent voter, you're still going to be treated like a second-class citizen. And in my opinion, that's a picture of how wrong our priorities are as a country. I'm not trying to make a judgment on marijuana use, but just a misuse of priorities. So moving on, just real quick before we go to Idaho, our big objective as an organization is to pass Final Four, Final Five voting in at least 5 states or districts by 2026. Alaska's done it. Nevada's on the way. Wisconsin has bipartisan legislation pending. There's a ballot campaign in New York City and a new reform campaign in Washington, D.C. And there's probably 5 or 6 other states that are seriously looking at either Final Four voting or one or the other part of it. So we're making great progress. And why 5 states? Todd has said this many times. Once 5 states have Final Four, Final Five voting, you now have 10 U.S. senators who are free to represent a majority of their constituents. They're no longer going to be beholden to the most extreme minority of their own party. And once 5 states pass this, we know from other reforms in the past, we will reach a tipping point. Voters will love this new system. They will demand it in other states. So thank you for joining us early in building this movement. And we're so excited about Idaho and Washington, D.C. because they represent a new chapter for this young organization. We're not quite 2 years old. We've been a fast follower and played a supporting role in many states, but in Idaho and DC, we have leaders who have been there from day one, getting these ballot initiatives off the ground. So that was an overly long run up and lead up to hand it off to Todd Achilles in Idaho to talk about the great work they're doing there and where things stand with their ballot amendment. And then we'll go to Lisa in Washington, D.C.
Great. Thanks. Thanks for that, Eric. Hi, everybody. Good to see you all. I'm Todd Achilles. I served in the Army as a tanker from 92 to 95 in the 69th Armor at Fort Stewart. Spent 20 years in the tech industry at T-Mobile and Hewlett Packard. And then the last 6 years, I've actually been teaching public policy at UC Berkeley. Contrary to George's comment, we are not Todd Achilles and the Seven Dwarfs. In fact, I fit really well inside an M1A1, so I'm clearly the shortest member of the group. But I do want to call out Scott Sim here. I actually got introduced to Scott. Scott was a Republican legislator through the Democratic minority leader. And in his last primary race, he was attacked by the far right in Idaho, and lost his primary by 6 votes. And I'll tell you, Scott is exactly that kind of political leader that, what we hope to get out of this whole movement is to get folks like Scott in leadership positions. So it's great to have him on the team. So just a quick update from Idaho. We beat the Attorney General in Supreme Court, in the state Supreme Court last week. Basically the Attorney General is supposed to draft the ballot titles, and his ballot title basically said this is a communist plot to steal your votes. Paraphrasing a little bit here, but that's effectively what it read like. The Supreme Court, the state Supreme Court, had no patience for this, and we got a good set of ballot titles here. So we got that on the 17th, and we kicked off signature gathering on the 19th. Huge turnout in Boise, huge turnout up in northern Idaho, and people are just fired up about this. And in fact, we got over 1,500 signatures in just a few hours on Saturday among these different kickoffs. I'll tell you, we are incredibly lucky in Idaho to have a grassroots organization called Reclaim Idaho. They've been able to successfully get 2 initiatives passed in the state, and this is one of the toughest states to get it done. They have just turned on the machine, and we are off and rolling. And I think, our lane in this whole thing is really to be that straight down the middle, cross-partisan voice, having conversations with Idahoans, probably a little bit older, a little bit male, a little bit more conservative, and explaining why, just, again, in a very factual way, why the open primary initiative is good for them. So we've already started those conversations. We're getting great feedback, and now that things have kicked off, we're gonna put our foot on the gas there. And just so everybody knows, we're going all in on this thing. It's a top 4 open primary and ranked choice voting. So we put that in the original ballot initiative. And even though the ranked choice voting part is a heavier lift than the open primaries, we're all in. And the feedback on this has been strong. In terms of other organizations supporting it, you guys mentioned Jim Jones. Jim's just a phenomenal servant in Idaho over the last decades. He's circling a big group of Republicans for open primaries. We're scaling up our organization. We had originally the Idaho Task Force of Veterans for Political Innovation, which was kind of a mouthful. So we've shortened it down to Veterans for Idaho Voters. And that's the organization we're building around. And just, an interesting fact too, there's 128,000 vets in Idaho. It's actually the 6th highest in the US. Montana's up there, Wyoming's up there. So we got this cluster, and it's a big, important constituency in the state. And I think just a last comment, when you politically you look at Idaho, it's one of the reddest states in the country. I think when you get below that to kitchen table issues, it's actually not that red at all. It's a center right state, always has been. And we're going to get this thing done here in Idaho. And I think this is just going to be a phenomenal example for all the other red states in the country.
Amen.
Thank you, Jim.
Jim, what would you add?
Well, I was just working on a list of more than 100 well-recognized Republicans who will be coming out in support of the initiative just after Labor Day. And I think it's going to be a revelation to a lot of the people who are traditional Republicans who are just sick at heart with what's happened to their party. And the idea, our former Commissioner of Veterans Affairs is going to be making a comment. I'm fixing up a press release to include him about how anyone who served our country should be able to vote in any damn primary he pleases. So there we
Oh
are.
yeah.
Amen. Amen. That's awesome. Thank you, Jim. And thanks, Todd. And I just want to offer a bit of commentary, and then Eric, maybe you can tee up Lisa. But I think this national ecosystem. You've got funders, a small cadre of ultra high net worth individuals who are really interested in primary election reform. They understand it, and we need them because they're fueling the movement financially in a lot of places. You've got some political consultants that are kind of taking a look at what's going on, and then you've got grassroots activists, which is probably how I would describe this call. And sometimes people are wearing multiple hats. But what I love about the Idaho example, and just what Jim and Todd and your leadership and George and Scott and others is, it's not a state that would have hit the calculus of the national political consulting class. They wouldn't have said Idaho is a target of opportunity. They'd say it's too red. So. But and I think this is where we come from. When we frame this as a people-powered movement, it's what voters, I don't care if it's deep red state or deep blue state, it is what voters want. And so we want this for Idaho voters, but I also selfishly want this to send a flare to the national movement to say, do not write off states. Don't think that you're smarter than the people on the ground to know what is possible, because I think this movement needs more bottoms up activation. And I don't think that when people go into rooms with donors and individuals, I don't think that they would have put Washington D.C. or Idaho on the map. And I think those are probably the two biggest places of opportunity for this movement nationally. So I give that as inspiration to all of you, whether you're in a very red state, a very purple state, or a very blue state. This is work on behalf of people. It cuts across ideology. Republicans are dissatisfied with their party. Even the extreme wing, the Democrats, even the extreme wing, are dissatisfied with their party. So not liking the two-party system is a universal message that is wildly popular. So don't be apologetic in doing this work. We're going to be meeting tomorrow, Eric and I, to build a strategy with some partners at Country First for Illinois, because that's where I spend my time, and it's a deep blue state. People don't think that there's any possibility there. I disagree. So anyway, I say all that to hopefully give some inspiration, but thanks Todd and Jim for those updates. We can get back to questions, but Eric, why don't you kick it over to Lisa for some late breaking updates as well?
Yeah, so Lisa was just on a call with the Board of Elections in DC. I was on for the first part of it. It seemed to be going well, but Lisa, we'd love to, hear the latest update, and if you can maybe just give an overview of how the campaign came together and where you are today. Lisa is the lead petitioner. I have the phrase wrong, but of the Make All Votes Count DC ballot amendment for semi-open primaries and ranked choice voting in Washington, D.C. So Lisa, hand it off to you.
All right, thanks, Todd. Thanks, Eric. Good morning, everyone. Literally just dropped in here after our Board of Elections hearing on short title and ballot language formation. So many of you have said a couple of things and many things here, and so I want to step back and first and foremost say, obviously, your nation's capital, the people of your nation's capital don't live in a state. We live in this weird thing called a district. It's the District of Columbia, but there are over 700,000 voters who, if given the chance, would love to be able to contribute to having senators that would form, I see in the chat, many different caucuses. I would recommend, as a sidebar, if you haven't already read the Centrist Manifesto by Charlie Whelan, pick that up. Charlie talked years ago about a fulcrum in the Senate And that is what we are doing in this movement, is providing those senators with cover they need to be able to vote in their constituents' interests. So although enacting this in DC won't provide 2 more senatorial votes, it'll do something very, very important. We're small, but we're mighty, and anything that happens in Washington, D.C. is heard across the country. Nakia, that book is called The Centrist Manifesto by Charles Whelan, and it's a tiny little book, but it's amazing. It's amazing. So what we're doing in DC is a ballot initiative, not unlike what's happening in Idaho, which takes open primaries and ranked choice voting, bundles them into one ballot initiative. Literally, as Eric said, I was on the phone in our board hearing where we were negotiating. They wanted to change our title from open primaries to semi-closed, and wrote a memo. Anyway, the bottom line is we got what we wanted. And our title is a little different. Let me find what I proposed, and amazing, we got exactly what I proposed. So we are now the Ranked Choice Voting and Open the Primary Elections to Independent Voters Act of 2024. And that was hard fought for, I tell you, because we want to change it to semi-closed. No, we want to change it to semi-open. No, we want to take away independent and say unaffiliated. And so, I didn't know I had such great negotiation skills, but I just made it happen. So I'm happy about that. We are a grassroots effort that was born out of a legislative push in the last cycle and the cycle before that for ranked choice voting. For those of you that don't know, I sit on the board of Unite America. And so very important to me is the package, the final 5 voting package. And so when those grassroots activists came to me and asked me, in the light of the legislation not being able to cross the finish line, if I would step in, my response was only if you add open primaries. So anyway, I got that too. So that's where we are. As of today, our title in short language will be published in the Register here in DC as of September 1st. We have until September 10th for people to offer comments, to sue us, which we're already being sued. And oh, by the way, I say when House Republicans don't like you and DC Dems don't like you, you're doing something right. So both sides are like really coming after us, and we are being sued, but that's okay. Bring it. I'm ready. Bring it. I know that I'm sort of battling, and literally my adrenaline is so high right now because it was an interesting 10 o'clock hour. I'm going to close my mouth right now because I could keep going and going. I'm so pumped right now. And I haven't even had any caffeine. It's crazy. But any questions, or I don't know our format. Todd, do you say something? Eric, do you say, are we doing a dance? Are we all happy? I'm like so excited right now.
We're all doing a dance. Lisa, can I ask you to say one other thing? And then I want to open up for others on the call to ask questions of Lisa, the Idaho team, or to add your own thoughts on what, kind of good of the order. But Lisa, my question is because I think I've seen some things, I don't want to misquote it, but the polling on this, talk about the opposition from the Democratic Party in DC, but also the support that you have based on polling within the district.
Sure. The polling is actually pretty fabulous. I don't have those numbers in front of me, but we polled very high overall on both open primaries and ranked choice voting. our favorables are above 50% overall. At one of those is 60. I don't have that in front of me, and my memory is crap on it because we had so much going on. But what I'll do, I will send that to Todd and Eric, and then we can talk about how to disseminate that among this group. What I don't want to release too much of the detail, but the polling was very strong, and it was very strong on both, and it was stronger than any of us anticipated. Even our persuadables, that is the ones who are doubtful about it, they even come in at about 47%. I mean, we wouldn't be doing this without this polling backing us. Because it wouldn't be successful. And we have a high hurdle in terms of education and the misinformation that is out here, and it's very unfair. I'll just put it that way. I have other words that would come out, but it wouldn't be appropriate. But we have a lot to do to counter the arguments of the establishment here, which wants no competition. That's really it. They want to continue to get into office without having majority support, and we're just not going to let that happen anymore. I know, Todd, you had another question, and I spaced that. I'm still high.
No, that's okay. You bask in your high. We'll find some articles, but in short, it does poll well. It's very popular amongst DC residents. So we actually expect, ranked choice voting is a popular issue in Washington, DC. It's typically among progressives. But this disconnect of the Democratic Party suing, I think it's really helpful in some ways to have this narrative of Washington, D.C. We know that in places like Alaska and more conservative states, they think that this can be sort of a Democratic Trojan horse. But the example of Washington, D.C. with the Democratic Party suing to not allow voters to have this on the ballot is demonstrative of the fact that this is not a partisan issue. It's just people, incumbents in power, that don't want competition because they fear competition because we don't like them. And they wouldn't do well with competition. That is representative, in which all voters can vote, in which, extreme ideology doesn't help you win, and I had a state senator or state representative in Alaska tell me that to her face, that the reason she's opposed is because she knows that a lot of what she says on social media isn't popular with a lot of people. And I'm like, that's a representative democracy. Maybe you shouldn't win your next election if you don't represent the majority of your constituents. And so anyway, I'll just say that. Eric, why don't I go to you, but then let's go around the horn for folks. And since we have a number of folks, if you want to just raise your hand, we can call on you to ask questions or add your own 2 cents to the good of the order. But Eric, you first.
Yeah, and just real quick, adding on Lisa's great comments. And Lisa, we're just as excited as you are. So keep up the great work. I try to post regularly or amplify. Lisa had a great op-ed over the weekend. Another VPI leader, Stephen Katz, helped with that, and I posted it on LinkedIn this morning. If you can go and comment on that and share these things with your network and help us get the word out, that's huge. And then if you're in the DC area this fall, and for sure early next year, there's going to be a lot of activities and options to get involved on the ground in DC. The signature gathering will start in earnest early next year, and we're planning on doing some training around that and getting veterans, VPI leaders involved. So just be looking for that in your emails, and we'll kick it over to, speaking of the DC area, and one of our great leaders in Virginia, Mike Cantwell. What do you have for us, brother?
Hey, everybody. Great to be here. Just a quick update. We had a little setback in June with ranked choice voting in Arlington, but we're not giving up. So we are working with our coalition partners to put additional pressure on Arlington County Board to try to get ranked choice voting in 2024. Just for everybody else around the country, it's really important to create coalitions for some of these activities. Next thing is we're having a Virginia all hands meeting on next Tuesday at 7:30 p.m. And I also wanted to say that I have started a side hustle. I think Todd likes that term, called Independence for America. And the theory of this is I'm going to provide campaign advising and consulting to local independent candidates throughout the country. I also have a podcast out with 3 podcasts in the can so far. And lastly, if you know any people that is leaving the military or is a federal government employee and needs some information on the Hatch Act and how they can run for local office, please reach out to me. That's all I got. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike. And Rhett Barker, for those of you who don't know, is our amazing SkillBridge fellow. He's getting his MBA at the University of Chicago. He's a fellow Naval Academy grad and has just been an incredible resource and supporter and help with VPI building our mission and vision. So Rhett, I'll kick it over to you, and thanks for all the good work you're doing, brother.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. Good morning, everyone. My name, as Eric said, I'm Rhett Barker, and I'm working the summer fellowship with the team. And one of the side tasks I have is to try to get more testimonials in the docket. So my primary mission with Todd is to gather funders and do research. And one of the aspects of this synergistic relationship is if we get more testimonials and stuff for people to see, it kind of adds more gravity and strength to our organization. So if you have time, I'm going to send the link right now. It takes 5 to 10 minutes, and then it gets put on the page and really helps out our mission.
Yeah,
That's
those
great.
are huge. If you've never done it, you can write it or you can record a quick video. We have examples. If you click on that link where the /testimonials, it's really a simple thing to do and it makes a big impact. So please, if you haven't done it, please submit a quick testimonial. Thanks, Rhett, for following up on that. Any other questions or comments for the good of the order, or questions on the Idaho campaign, or anything from other states that we haven't mentioned today?
I saw something in the chat really quickly about lodging in DC for when we activate for this training. We're going to work on that, and somehow, some way, we're going to find places for people to stay. So stay tuned. I don't have any details right now. We're just really in the formation, just trying to work out timing, all of those things. But as those details become available, I will share with everyone.
Awesome. Thanks, Colleen.
Lisa.
Eric,
Yeah, George, go ahead.
just one thing we ran across here in Idaho. Jim can probably speak to some of this. 2 things happened that were unheard of. First of all, the Supreme Court heard the arguments on our ballot language on Monday and issued a full ruling on Thursday. I have never in my life seen a Supreme Court move with that kind of speed. Secondly, and more importantly, the Attorney General of this state, in his campaign against us, literally submitted a false statement over his signature in writing describing what we're doing, and then sent the Solicitor General to the Supreme Court to repeat the same lie, and the court called him out on it. Literally, the quote from the decision is, "This statement is palpably incorrect." It speaks to me to the panic that we're seeing of the folks who oppose this, because they know it's an existential threat to their power base. Dirty tricks are not out of the question. We've already felt them.
Yeah. George, thanks for that. And we, I don't know if we have any of our Alaska team on the call, but we have seen that in Alaska, part of, the panic that you feel from people who fundamentally know that they are misrepresentative of the population writ large, that they're only winning by virtue of a hijacked, closed primary system, that, that they feel that panic. And we see that in Alaska. And this is why Sarah Palin has been so active in mobilizing her opposition. It's not that Republicans don't win in Alaska, it's that Sarah Palin can't win in Alaska. If she acts like she has acted historically, if she changes her behavior, I think there's a path for her. And so anyway, So we have seen that, but a lot of the opposition is disorganized. You know, sometimes it's like you catch them in their own lies, and we know that in Alaska, they're in the process of trying to collect signatures, but they're disorganized. They're breaking rules. They're leaving books of petitions sitting out unattended to for people to sign, which is not legal. You have to validate signatures and do all these things. And so we've been operating in the assumption that Alaska is going to have a strong opposition campaign, but to date, they have showed disorganization, lack of leadership. They can't keep up with what they have said previously, not wanting to follow the rules, not thinking that the rules apply to them. And so all of that that hurts us from a governing standpoint helps us in these reform efforts, because folks just aren't organized. And we're seeing that play out in Alaska, and we are seeing them attempting to break rules, and we are going to hold them accountable for that. So thanks for that, George. We should all be aware of that. Everywhere we're trying to do this work. Any other updates? Here's one thing I want to say, and then Eric, I want to give you the final word on the call. But if you're new to the call, haven't done much yet, and wondering how do I get started? Here's what I would suggest you do. Number one, connect with the other volunteers in your state. All of you are on our website. So if you just go to Veterans for Political Innovation, find your state, you'll see your beautiful headshot with a quote. If you don't have a quote yet, it's because we haven't received one. So that's back to Rhett's point. Give us a testimonial. Connect with the other people in your state would be step one. Step two is plug into the state-based reform organizations. It might be an organization that's focused on, like, Reclaim Idaho, which does just citizen-powered movement building. It might be a ranked choice voting organization. It might be Fair Vote. It might be an organization called Democracy Found in Wisconsin, but do a little digging. We can help you with that if you're lost. But the best thing you can do is connect with the other state leaders, and then plug into, just join whatever calls are taking place in the state. Reach out to the head of Fair Vote or the head of whatever the equivalent organization is, and say, hey, I'm the state leader with Veterans for Political Innovation, and I want to join the coalition. And that is just step one, and it'll take you far, in my experience. So if you're wondering what exactly do, I would just suggest those two things, and then stay on the calls with us on a monthly basis as you're able to. We rotate the time of these calls, because I know 10 a.m. Central is a good time for some folks, bad time for other folks. So, you know, the next one might be at 6 p.m., might be at 8 a.m. So just know that we're trying to move this around so that we don't create standing conflicts for folks, and so that new folks can join. But my final word is just going to be thank you for what everyone's doing. It's a long game. We don't know where the bright spots are going to show up, but I'm confident that if we are everywhere, you know, like, we can feel very pessimistic about a place like Ohio, but then we can get very optimistic about an effort in Idaho. I wouldn't predict what states this is going to pop in, but I think that if we are all hands on deck with people in all 50 states, we are going to see successes. And that's what we have to stay vigilant towards, is meeting the energy of the moment, bringing funders to bear. That's a lot of what I'm spending my time doing, making sure that funders know where the opportunities are, and putting them in touch with campaign leaders to say, look, invest in this. This is possible. So it's going to require certain humility on the national side, and then activation locally. But I think if the humility is there, and the resources are there nationally, and the energy is there locally, we're going to create those moments of opportunity, and we're going to get states to pass change their laws. And then a lot of, again, movement building. It seems slow and impossible until it is all of a sudden fast and seemingly inevitable. And if you look at reform movements in this country, that is how it works. It seems impossible, and then it happens in somewhere that you didn't expect it, and then every state's having a conversation about it. And we are stoking that very effort in this election reform space, and you're all a huge part of that. So I can't thank you enough. Maybe Lisa, I'll give you the word, and then you go to Eric for the final word.
Yeah, okay, thanks. And what I wanted to say is, if you're in a position of, I don't know how to get started, or I want something to happen, or it's not happening the way I want it to happen, have faith. A year ago, there was no such thing as even the thought of an act that would be what it is today in DC for open primaries and ranked choice voting. If you looked at where we were a year ago, there was Lisa in her living room literally saying, I will be at the next primary election wearing a sandwich board saying voter suppression. And then there was the group that was supporting the legislative effort for ranked choice voting, licking their wounds because they'd reached a spot where they had a split vote in the city council and the other vote wasn't going to come. So literally a year ago, what happened today wasn't on anyone's radar because I thought I was going to do open primaries all by myself. And those folks that were doing ranked choice voting thought that they were done. And look where we are today. So
yeah,
keep hope alive.
Yes.
Keep hope alive.
I probably shouldn't risk trying to add anything to that, Lisa. That's awesome. That's awesome. And Todd mentioned, you know, one of our core values is we are playing the long game and we know we'll be friends when our work is done. And so we're here, it's mission centered, built on real friendship. That's the other thing is we're not here to use each other or build each other's platforms. We're here to get a mission done, which all of us as veterans, we're familiar with that, right? And you all are building this mission, this national movement together, and we can't thank you enough. I wanted to close out with, I think most of you know I'm a person of faith, and I, in my devotional this morning, there was something that I felt like was on point. The verse is, blessed is the one who endures trials. And in that context, the word blessed means an attitude of determined courage that is unaffected by external circumstances. An attitude of determined courage that is unaffected by external circumstances. So there's, I think, maybe a debate happening somewhere tonight, and that's where all the attention is focused, right? The media, the politics industry, it's all about selling more Coke and more Pepsi. But we have a mission that matters. It's the right mission at the right time. And all of you are blessed because you are showing determined courage that is unaffected by the circus that's going on around us. We will get this mission done together thanks to each and every person who's on this call. So we can't thank you enough. And onward we go. Idaho, D.C., Nevada, Wisconsin, New York City, Alaska, they light the path. And now we need to bring it to all 50 states as quickly as possible. So onward.
Thanks, Eric.
Buddy.
Thanks, Todd. Thanks, Lisa.
Thanks, everyone. Good luck.
Guys, good luck out there. We're here for you. Reach out if you need things.